Started again with Dwayne talking about reporting requirements. Our lunch is scheduled at about 12:15, so we will not rush through, but proceed until then.
I want to go over the reporting requirements. Again, these are all in the RFA. I just wanted to highlight some of the most important features of them. Again, the program biannual or narrative reports and the quarterly fiscal reports are described in Appendix G. The narrative part, the biannual report is due February 28th, and the report, or for the period ending February 28th, the report is due March 30th. And then for the final report, again, this is for this year's grant, the time period ending August 31st, the report is due by September 28th, again, of next year. I don't know if those of you who have been around a while will remember we used to have 4 quarterly reports, and we found out, the first quarter, nothing much happened. Second quarter, a bit happened. Third quarter, not much additional happened. And then the final report is when we get everything that happened. And we realized that it wasn't really constructive to have you do 2 interim reports that weren't really instructive or informative. So we narrowed it down to two biannual reports a couple of 2 or 3 cycles ago. For the fiscal, which is your costs and your budget, you need to submit these at least quarterly. If your college has a more frequent reporting period, such as monthly or bi-monthly, go ahead and use that, but you need to at least submit one every quarter. And again, the first quarter report the period ends November 30th, and it's due by December 15th. And you go on, the second one is February 28th, is due March 9th. The third period ends May 31st, and that's due June 15th. And then the big one is the final report, which is due August 31st. So this is where all of your costs should be accounted for by that point. And that report is due September 28th. So if you're getting into the grant cycle for this year, again, the dates are in the 2016-2017 RFA, and they're very similar to this, but this gives you an idea of when the reports will be due next year. One thing to talk about the final expenditure report, you need to make sure you have actual expenditures. You're not allowed to estimate how much you think it's going to cost. It has to be an actual cost, an actual receipt or invoice or statement showing how much you paid for those services or equipment. You have until October 13th of 2018 to submit corrections with CB approval. And finally, make sure you have the CB 100 and CB 320, which is the activity report. This is where all of your activities, budget by activity goes. And just a reminder, as Donna mentioned in the beginning, reallocation is not automatic. If you don't spend the money, you don't automatically get it back. It stays in the pool and then gets reallocated to the colleges that have met the 2P1, 3P1, and 4P1. So for the biannual reports, these will provide a progress report and the results of the performance improvement plan and evaluation plan for each core indicator. You want to make sure to include the status of each action item and the estimated time of completion. As we mentioned before, when you're filling out the application, you want to make sure that you divide or subdivide each activity into either quarters or semesters or months, so that by the biannual report, you can have at least show something, either the first semester or the first quarter, that has been completed or is at least in progress. The biannual reports focus on the outputs and outcomes of the CTE programs, the activities and budgeted items used to improve the performance measures. The data for the target measures is in the same format as it is in the original plan. Again, we have two reports submitted, the mid-year, which is the biannual, and the final report. And examples of these are in Appendix G. Make sure you use the formal language, and these reports are often reviewed by the Department of Education, so we want to make sure that you have the best spelling and grammar and everything like that all in place. Some key points about the biannual reports. The activities and strategies must be completed and the data associated with them collected within the grant period. So as Donna mentioned before, if you purchased an equipment on August 15th, it's unlikely that that is going to be put into use before August 31st. So you want to make sure that all of the activities and equipment and supplies are purchased and used within the grant period. You want to make sure that the results are quantifiable. Like we mentioned, you want to have either a percentage increase or a number of students, an additional number of students served. You want to have a number or percentage or something quantifiable so that by the final report you can say, yes, we met that 5% increase, or no, we only increased it 4.8%. Something quantifiable that you can show us. It's important to review the target measures in Section 7323 in the RFA. And this states that the applicant shall identify one or more target measures for each activity and strategy, and that each target measure must clearly relate to its activity or strategy, and it must state a planned output or outcome toward improved performance on the core indicator under which it follows. The target measures shall be based upon data that can be collected prior to the submission of the final report. So if you have either graduation or a number of students receiving tutoring or whatever the data is, you need to be able to collect it before the August 31st deadline. We have examples in the RFA of what an evaluation plan, and here's one for 2P1. As you see, the activity or strategy is that the CT instructors will lead tours of the Academic Skills Center and encourage students in their classes to get tutoring when they have trouble. The timeline, as you can see, is broken out, one for the fall semester and then one for the spring semester. Might also have one for the summer semester if so needed. And again, the target measures can be identical over these periods, but they do need to be subdivided into those categories. Finally, in your biannual report, you want to start when you put in your comment, you want to put the word biannual in front of that. And you want to make sure that when you do the final report that you keep that section of the biannual so that we can see what was done in the biannual and then what additionally has been done for the final report. And the main question, what is the impact of these reporting requirements? Why do we go through so much trouble to make sure that you report what we need to see? And that is that we, the staff, have to evaluate the quality and completeness of all of the reports. And we may have to ask for clarification, additional information, or other changes to make it consistent with your plan or with the RFA. Finally, at the end of each year, you're required to submit an inventory report, and this is all inventory that has been purchased by Perkins. Could be 3 or 5 years ago, it could be last year, but it has to include all Perkins equipment. So you want to make sure that on your campus you have a good inventory plan that can show everything that was purchased by Perkins, and whether it's capitalized or non-capitalized. The cumulative inventory that meets the equipment definition. And these include data fields such as the identification number, the description of the property, the date that it was acquired, the cost, the current location, and if applicable, the disposition status and the date. This is when you dispose of it, either you sold it or auctioned it or donated it, whatever you did when it reached the end of its useful life, what the disposition of that equipment was. That's basically it. Again, the RFA has a lot more detail on these reporting requirements. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, or you can save those questions for the lunch break. And now we'll go on to Mindy.
Okay, and as we're getting slides switched over, I'll just kind of begin. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the core indicators are calculated. It's a subject of frustration at times for Perkins staff, for administrators and program directors of CTE programs. It's kind of a mystery to many folks how they're calculated. It's been a mystery to me in the past. I think there are basically two people here at the coordinating board who understand that data calculation fully, and maybe one mystic in the mountains of Tibet who divined it by telepathy. Okay. It's a source of frustration. Perkins staff don't deal directly with data collection. The data collection function and the program management function are separated, as well they should be, because data collection and analysis is a complex task. What I'm going to show you in this presentation is an overview of how the data collection process works, okay? It's a layman's overview. Now, in this overview, I'm going to give you 3 components that are critical to understanding the core indicator performance calculations you see in your portal and on our website, okay? And I'll point those out as I go along. Now, let's go ahead and just get started. Okay, now here you see an example institution's 2P1 core indicator performance table. It's taken from the portal. I'm going to ask you to notice the indicator or the institution's positive performance trends over 3 years. Look at that. That shows that they've been applying some strategy to improving their core indicator performance. Now, these steady positive trends are never an accident, rarely an accident. They usually do indicate, good program planning. They represent, too, a lot of work done on the ground by an institution. That little number has a whole lot of work behind it. Now, it would seem reasonable to assume that the new 2016-17 performance number shows the result of all the hard work you did last year. Once we get that posted in the spring, it's tentative, but it shows the work you did last year. It would also seem reasonable to assume that come this fall, if this example institution has also met 3P1 and 4P1 within 90%, that some reallocation funds will be coming. Both of those assumptions would be wrong. And I'm going to try to elucidate the reasons why as we go and tell you what is right instead, okay? We'll come back to this in a few minutes, but first let me go on and explain core indicator calculations. I'm going to start by kind of turning the telescope around. Now, you're accustomed to seeing those tables with the sources of the data listed as footnotes beneath each table. What I'm going to do here is ask you to look at each data source, and we're going to look at the core indicators they feed into, okay? First, we see the student report and the graduation report here, and you see the core indicators that they feed into in parentheses after each one. Now, I'm not going to read their descriptions to you, but I do want to call your attention to who reports these to the coordinating board. I should have said that these CBM reports, if you don't deal with that side of your college's activity, these CBM reports are reports that institutions submit to the coordinating board on a regular schedule, okay? You report on your student activities via this reporting. Look at who submits these 2 reports. Pretty much anyone in the state of Texas who opens their doors to a post-secondary student submits these reports to us, okay? Now, this is an important thing to consider. A common question about the core indicators is why institutions' own records don't match what we say you did. This is a big reason why. We've got access to data you cannot access. You don't know what any institution submitted about your student, because we track your student even after they leave your college for a period of time, okay? We can do that, but you can't. So that's a big reason why you can't make your records match what your core indicators say. It's a source of frustration at the program level, but this explains why. I'm going to show you more in a minute, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you, too, that this is the first component of those three components. You need to know that we access a broad swath of data that institutions cannot access. Okay? All right. Let's go on to look at other reports. There's the student schedule report. There's the occupational skills achievement report, used to be the marketable skills achievement report. All CTCs and state colleges report these, and in the case of the student schedule report, public universities report it too. And here we have the final three data sources: the annual licensure report, the supplemental follow-up survey, and the unemployment insurance wage records. Okay? Now, a couple of things about these. The CB-116, the supplemental follow-up survey, that's a report institutions can submit to the coordinating board based on a survey they do of their students who have exited. Some of you are nodding. You're familiar with that report. It's the last piece of a data trail that I'll talk more about in a minute. And I should say, too, here, please see that CB-116, the supplemental follow-up survey, feeds 2P1, 3P1, and 4P1 calculation. In the portal, we only show that it supports 4P1. We need to update that, but it does feed into all three of these. And of course, unemployment insurance wage records aren't reported to the coordinating board, but our Perkins data analyst has access to this confidential data through Department of Labor and TWC records. So those are the 7 data sources that support calculation of core indicators. Okay, now I'll go over the reporting cycle. It begins with institutional reporting, the CBM reports, the licensure report, the supplemental CBM 116 for each academic year. Now, you can read the details of when they're submitted here, but the bottom line is that it takes about 2.5 years for an academic year's reporting data to be reported out and certified. It takes about 2.5 years, okay, from that fall of the beginning of that semester for that academic year. Okay, that's important to remember. Now you can see, for example, that my example report here, 2013-14 academic year, look down there at the CBM or the CB-116, that fall due date in academic year 16. Okay, all right. Now let me move on to the consolidated annual report. Is anybody in this room familiar with the consolidated annual report? Well, you will be after today. It drives a lot of how your core indicators look. It is a joint report that the coordinating board submits annually with TEA on state level performance on the core indicators and the activities at the state level that supported the core indicators. Every December, we report on the previous program year, okay? Every December, we report on the previous program year. So how do we collect that data? We do it by the most recently completed data set we have available to us in that December. Okay, this trailing data cycle is the second important component of understanding how the core indicators are calculated. because at the same time we calculate the state's performance, we calculate each institution's performance on the core indicators. So here's this trailing data. Now, you can see here the flow chart of that trailing data. For example, for the report we submitted for, hold on, let me not lose my place here. This is complicated. Okay, I'm going to highlight that little box. Okay, the CAR we submit every December is for an academic year. Now, let me remind you, every December, okay, let's say December 15, we're in the academic year 16, okay? We're reporting on data that was finalized for academic year 14. I'm going to show you how this lines up in a minute. All right. Now, I'm going to go to the next screen and I'm going to show you the third important component with the first two, that trailing data and the vast swath of data we have access to. Those two components for understanding core indicator calculation. But I'm going to point out something that some of you may be wondering about already. Now, I'm going to take this first line and I've underlined 1314 there. I bet some of you are wondering why reporting based on an academic year that was 13-14 for a report that was submitted in academic year 15-16 becomes your academic year 14-15 core indicator performance. Let me see if I can bring some light on this and pull this all together for you. Okay, here we are back at our little 2P1 table again, okay? Now this table, it's current. I just took it last week.
Except for the 35% isn't for 17-18 yet.
Yes, you're correct. 2P1's target for 17-18 is 35%. 90% will be 31.5%. Okay, thank you, Eagle Eye Carlin. Okay, all right. It's current. So you see that 17-18 thing on the end of the table all ready to go for this coming year. You see the data filled in for 16-17. It was blank at the beginning of the year, just as 17-18 is now. We've got your tentative end-year performance posted. Okay. Now I'm going to pull this all together for you. Okay? And I'm going to make a confession. For a long time, I thought that those years at the top of each section of the table were the previous academic year. Okay? Some of you may have thought the same thing, but they are not. And this is the final critical component, and this is what brings it all together. Please remember you're going to get these slides so you can study them later, okay? I'm going to click 16-17 here and circle it. This is a Perkins program year and not an academic year. Okay, they are not synonymous. Other than running concurrently, they have nothing to do with one another. A Perkins program year is the time period covered by a set of federally negotiated core indicator targets. All right? Now, institutional reporting and activities that take place in a concurrent academic year have no impact whatsoever on a Perkins program year. Oh, I see some scowls out there. I know this is difficult to understand. So let's bring this all together. So, what academic year does align with the time period we've got circled here? For 16-17, let's go back over here. Academic year 15-16, by the time this coming December that we report on this just finished Perkins program year, all reporting for academic year 15-16 will be done. And we'll have your CTE students tracked out. Okay? All right. Let's go back over here. And I'm going to point out to you that we tell you this with footnote. For each actual performance for the state and for you that you see, there's a footnote. It points to that year. That's the data year by which that core indicator will be determined. Okay? And you see that data flow kind of laid out here. Your 16-17 data right now are tentative. It will not become final until we develop and submit that CAR report this coming December. The final will be posted next spring or very early summer. Now, reallocations will be based, when we announce them this fall, should they become available, they typically are, will be based on the most recent final performance data. Now, if we do this in fall before we submit the CAR in December, if we do this in fall, what year has the most recently finalized and reported to the feds data? It's not 16-17, which year will it be? 15-16. Okay, you guys are tracking with me on this. Okay, you got that? Okay, now, I'm going to show you one final little piece here, and then it will be time to break for lunch, and you can all go take an Advil for your headaches that you didn't have 15 minutes ago. Look at this. Here's a reason why you don't want us using that tentative data. This is just a sample I took from an institution's 2P1. Okay? I took that sample from 16 and from 17, FY16 and FY17, AY16, AY17. This is for 2015, 2016. Or that should be Perkins program year 16 and 17. Let's say that. The tentative data for 2015-16 for 2P1 showed this institution not meeting core indicator 2P1. It missed it by 1.27%. Do you see that? When we got the finalized data uploaded in the spring, after we submitted the CAR in December, it had come over that 90% line. If they met the other two core indicators, they were eligible for reallocation. Now, I should say it could go the other way, but you certainly don't want to miss out on funds that you would have been eligible for. And that is what I can tell you in brief overview about how the core indicators are calculated. Okay, now it is time for our lunch break. I'm going to break us here. Donna, do you have any further announcements?
Yes, we do have a lunch speaker, but we'll wait till about 12:15 to get started with Leslie, so that to give you time to get your food and if you need to go to the restroom and those types of things. I do have an announcement that has come in, and that's that for planning purposes for your application, that we've been told that TCCIL will not have a fall conference this year. They're reorganizing and restructuring, so their next conference will be the fall of 18. So, I would advise not to put that in your application since they won't be having it. But TACD will be on as usual in the spring. Thank you. And lunch, sandwiches and such are over there on the side. We just have water, but there are machines and stuff down the hall in our big break room, which is right before the glass doors where you came in on the right. Thank you.
Somebody else, yeah, I'm not worried.
Couple of handouts, and Dwayne was wonderful because I counted 30 and Dwayne went and made me some extra copies. So if you do not have a copy of best practices and performance improvement plan ideas, if you'll raise your hand and we will get you a copy real quick. I will give you a little insight and background on why I've ended up here. I've been with Temple College 15 years, and I'm an officer with Robinson Police Department. So when I started at Temple College, I was working with crime victims and sexual assault victims and still working with Robinson, and I took on my first job at Temple College as the Department Chair of Criminal Justice. So I have been in CTE from 18 years old when I was working with telecommunications and then got commissioned as an officer. When Temple College was getting ready to do some transition with Perkins, they looked around at the CTE department chairs, and my boss at the time said, "Hey, I thought I remembered when I interviewed you that you had done grant writing." And I looked at the ceiling and I went, "I don't know what you're talking about." And that didn't work very successfully for me. And so I took on Perkins as another duty assigned. And it has turned into one of my passions and definitely one of my loves. So I've been working with Perkins now for about 10 years. One of my first steps that I took when it came to Perkins is a wonderful man named Dr. Jimmy Roberts at Temple College, who has mentored me along and helped me with this, took me to TACTI. And he always made sure that we went to TACTI and TCCIL. And so I sat like a very dutiful officer at the back of the room with my back to the wall, because there were very sketchy people in that room and you never knew what threats there were. Well, the threats was called an RFA in my mind as I read my first RFA, and I thought, oh my, okay, I have to get back into all of this. When it came to Perkins, y'all, I am at heart a very introvert. I do great when I am in the classroom and in my environment, but the rest of the time I'm pretty shy, and I don't approach people a whole lot. And so I saw people like Don Perry and Catherine O'Brien and Sissy Matthews, and I put them on a pedestal, and I didn't approach, but I would eavesdrop often. Because they were talking about new ideas and innovative ideas. And so slowly there's been a network that has been formed, and I've been adopted in. So for those of y'all that are brand new, whether it's about to start Perkins Monday or a couple of weeks, I will tell you, welcome to the family. Because this has become a family for me, and I want you to know, approach me. Don't ever put me on that pedestal like I did others. I will answer your phone call. I will help you with an email, but you need to know I'm not a program person, and I in no way would want to slight what is their expertise, what is their responsibilities, of course, and their knowledge. But sometimes I have found that people in the field, we hesitate because we think they're busy. And although they're busy, they're never too busy for us, and they've reiterated that many times, and they're definitely my go-to, because sometimes even I get the information a little skewed, or I put something in my head that maybe was a past one that I keep interpreting a little wrong. So it's always a learning aspect for me. So please know, I'm there to help. I'm there to answer questions. I'm there sometimes just to vent frustrations. And I also know that my institution is very different than maybe the way your institution functions or processes things. So that being said, they've asked me to take you through what was a leadership project where we started with some best practices and performance improvement plan ideas. And as they're bringing things back up, I will tell you, Elizabeth came for her site visit at Temple College, and as we were talking about different things, I, being a little bit of a smarty, said, you know, y'all really need to add a best practices or performance improvement plans. And she goes, that's a great leadership idea. You should write that. And I took the challenge, and then that's what happened. And so 2 years ago, under Perkins Leadership Grant, we wrote what was a performance improvement plan catalog and best practices. The original intent was 10 best practices, and we focused on 2P1, 3P1, and 4P1. Hang on, I'm waiting just a second. As soon as he has my PowerPoint slide up, I'll be... Dwayne, is something off with my presentation, or?
No, it's the computer.
Oh, okay.
About your summer vacation. While you're waiting.
So we will digress here slightly.
Talk about how you presented it at the national conference and how the feedback you got there.
Overwhelmed with information. The summer vacation was great. I'm celebrating 15 years tomorrow with my husband. So we went on a cruise. I highly recommend it. Especially when you turn the phone off for 4 days. That's just so enlightening. So what Elizabeth just referred to is, of course, I've told you about TCCIL, which is Texas Community College Instructional Leaders. I have always gone because I always at any point was trying to pick up Perkins tidbits. TACTE, Texas Association for Career and Technical Educators, I highly encourage you to join. They provide lots of information. And then also I always went for whatever would be RFA updates, Perkins information, Perkins professional development, and all the leadership people present during that conference too. I also discovered NACTI. If you have never heard of NACTI, National Association for Career Technical Education Information. And they've been at Savannah. We just left Little Rock, and next year they're at Phoenix, and the year after they're at, I'm not sure. That was Perkins. They go all the way from Perkins 101 to Perkins, for lack of a better term, Perkins on steroids. Very, very informative conference, usually 5 days. I've always hesitated to go because it's always during the middle of final exams. But for me to have somebody else administer my finals exams and go to that was very, very informative for me. All right, so as you can see here, I like a lot of Calvin and Hobbes, so I'm probably dating myself here. This was definitely me at the beginning. And I was the person where this is a job for Leslie, and I stumbled immediately. My first RFA was very, very cumbersome and probably all over the place, and it went in a lot of circles. And in fact, a minute ago, somebody asked me about the local plan, and I said, the best way I know how to describe the local plan is to say you're painting a picture for them of how your function interacts, how it works, and how it performs and enhances CTE and CTE instruction. So if you're feeling this way and you do stumble, don't worry. We're here, they're here, and there's lots of questions and there's lots of avenues we've developed for communication. The original intent on focus for 2P1, 3P1, and 4P1 was because reallocation dollars were going to change. And we wanted to make sure that we set some standards and some ideas for how to improve those if any institution was struggling with those. The original hope was to have 10 promising best practices for each one, and there were 10 experts in the field. So we took the data in from those that had met the target. Our original design was if they'd met the target 100% for the last 3 years and maybe 90%, they were eligible to submit best practices through SurveyMonkey. And then we also had people submit their performance improvement plan. Once it was scored accordingly with our experts, consultants in the field, we then published and provided you a copy of what are the 10 promising best practices that we found from 2P1, credential, certificate, and diploma. Now, please note, this was 2 years ago when the term marketable skills was used. Obviously, that term has turned into occupational skills, so we have left the original publication, which was appropriate to that leadership grant. So when you see marketable skills, please know that that needs to change to occupational skills. What the experts and consultants in the field scored and what came to be these 10 promising best practices, a lot of it was a lot of what you've also now seen on what has been the Pathways Project. As you're looking at a lot of stackability, a lot of also showing students what their options are, whether it's certificate into AAS. You also notice here that there's lots of a theme that has gone throughout, intrusive advising. Very specifically looking at your students, and don't let your students figure it out or stumble out there. A lot of them hesitate even to approach us for what is my next class, what's my next plan, can you map me out the next 2 years? So I've given you a copy of this, and obviously I don't want to read it to you, but you'll also see some of the themes and some of the ideas that have been picked up on. A lot of automatic awarding. I was amazed how many students didn't even know that they were complete and wouldn't file for graduation. So there's a lot of things that came out of this grant that I've embedded into our own processes and practices with department chairs. So we now run lists of majors, and we then run completion reports. We run highest hours on spreadsheets, and every year as a Perkins director, I start and look at those high hour students to see where are they, what do they need to complete, have we communicated what they are so that they have not misunderstood or are looking at a class wrong, or what happens if a class has changed under Wickham and was archived and we can't offer it. Are we substituting accordingly? Are we making sure that they are able to finish out? And please know, y'all, when I started this grant, it was very selfish because I wanted some ideas. I'm like, I'm tired of the old stuff that I'm doing. What's new? What's innovated? And then it has really spread across as other people, as you're writing your plans or looking for those performance improvement evaluation plans, what are some things other people are doing? So please know there's the best practices, and then also sometimes the same theme came across. When we originally put this out there, everybody kind of almost copied and pasted their performance improvement plan into the SurveyMonkey. And so what we found we needed to do was basically create catalog of ideas. Instead of just giving y'all a mass of 3 different people doing the same thing, we thought it was far more structured and far more appropriate for you to have just a catalog of different ideas when you were trying to develop plans. Again, some of the same themes are familiar to what are also best practices, and so you've already heard me talk about professional development. You've also heard me talk about intrusive advising, but then there are also, on this one I'd like to point out, very specific CTE tutoring. Most all of us would be remiss if we didn't have some type of tutoring, whether it's online tutoring, whether it's tutoring services, but sometimes CTE tutoring is uniquely different. And so there's a lot of people that have embedded very specific CTE tutoring, because the person that works in the tutoring department may know nothing about CIS programming, may know nothing about criminal justice, legal aspects, things like that. I also would like to emphasize data analysis. That has been huge for me at Temple College, especially when I manage Perkins. And it will apply here in Credential, but I also will tell you how it had a major impact on recruiting. You are owning Perkins, and Perkins will hopefully be your love like it's my love, but the rest of the college may not understand Perkins, or they may not understand CTE. And so at Temple College, sometimes some simple things that we are doing had a significant impact on me. And so simply, I will tell you, when we had some new people coming in and maybe they had finished an AA and needed to pick up some additional classes for transfer because they required a minor, instead of putting them on an AA, they moved him down to an AAS, and the top AAS was in my accounting or bookkeeping. And so we were pulling list of majors and going, why is our retention struggling so significantly here? And finding out, well, they were just picking up transfer. There was no intent of finishing out an AAS. So in advising, they were putting them down on a different degree plan because they needed to just pick up classes, and it wasn't applicable, and that other degree plan was complete, and it was significantly affecting my retention in this program. So I've become huge about data analysis and list of majors and looking at those declared majors. Are they appropriate? Are they really on point? And sometimes even look at what they're registering for. Now, structured pathways, especially if your system is closed off, meaning they have to take a class on their degree plan, has helped. But we had a lot of students that were self-advising, and I was AAS criminal justice about 5 years ago. I forgot to change that. And they haven't taken anything related to criminal justice. So this is another theme that I've seen just proactively is really the data analysis, which is nice because when you're writing your performance improvement plan, you can say that we're going to contact 3 majors every week and make sure that we've communicated to them what their structured pathway is, and increase our retention, increase our completion, increase our placement through your data. By the way, please don't hesitate to jump in and add comments. Y'all know my dialogue. I prefer comments as you go. This is a continuation of other performance improvement plans. A lot of survey information. If you have SurveyMonkey, sometimes SurveyMonkey, I have used it in leadership projects and then our institutional effectiveness. Although there are SESI surveys, we have found out that we have surveyed individual students and found out what's hindering you from retention. What was the problem? Sometimes it's a culture within a department where they feel like they need to figure it out on their own. Sometimes it was a misunderstanding about catalogs or when catalog changes or when classes changes or internships, background checks, things like that. So the survey informations have been a viability possibility for understanding what might be some hindrances that never get communicated to you. Transitioning over to 3P1, again, the original goal was 10 best practices, but when it all got weighted into the scale and into the system, we came up with 5. Notice at the top when I want to point out to you the establish, implementation, and maintain a database of your CTE student information. As instructors, department chairs, sometimes they know who their majors are, but then sometimes maybe the other faculty don't realize who might be a major. And so making those connections and making those relationships also are another major theme that you'll see in this. Connecting with a student where they feel that it's that one person that all of a sudden had a vested interest in them. Sometimes it's an advisor that they connect with, sometimes it's an instructor. Sometimes at time periods, it's been our administrative assistant within my division because they can go to her for registration and advising, and it's that encouraging, that sometimes that smile that makes the difference and keeps them at your institution or in your system. If you don't have career services, I highly encourage career services. Some of y'all might be my generation, and a lot of my generation is we figured it out on our own. And they're almost overwhelmed with information. I will tell you, I have 2 teenage daughters that in 6th grade they've started with, what do you want to be? 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 And my sixth grade daughter that just finished and my new daughter about to go into high school, my freshman daughter next year has already taken 6 career assessment tests. 6. And she's not even a freshman. She has not yet started her first day. So they are almost inundated at the ISDs with what do you want to be, what do you want to be, that they feel like they should have figured it out by now. And so I have one that is very driven and knows exactly what she wants. I have my 6th grade who says at 6th grade, going into 7th grade next year, she goes, you know what, I'm tired of them asking me that question, Mom. And so you have those 2 mindsets in our students that they hesitate about their career because in their world with the ISD, they should have already figured out and they should know what plan they're on. And they should all have this path specifically already designed. So don't hesitate with your career services to make sure that they have options and can really, sometimes they're changing options. What they thought was their original love might not be what will be their end love. Again, on your 3P1, your performance improvement plan, these are just ideas for you to help you develop or maybe do something different. A lot of y'all already do articulations, and then of course with the Texas Career Pathways project, that has been a supplement and increase. I'd like to point out the unpreparedness. I am very, very guilty of thinking that if you come to me, you've got your game together, whether it's study skills, whether it's time management. I assume students will figure out how to access our college library databases, and they really don't nowadays. So it goes back to creating that connection with them and sometimes finding out what are the unprepared aspects. Our Health Careers addresses a lot of these through different seminars through our Health Careers Professions Division. You also will see sometimes very specific CTE recruiting, and then also early identification and struggling. Through early identification and struggling, we will take the students after the first exam, and after a set base score, those students get reported into a retention specialist, or sometimes get assigned a specific advisor to help them if they're having struggles. I will tell you one time period that I've struggled with retention is there are time periods that sometimes retaining is not a viable option. I've already alluded to you that I teach criminal justice, and it's very difficult when somebody comes to me and tells me that they have a felony. I have to have a very candid conversation about what their placement options will be with a felony, especially a high-level felony. So please know that retention, I understand definitely that sometimes retention is they're not a good fit, but then that doesn't mean that there's not another CTE possibility. So retention is not always 100%, but there's also a lot of other things where you can transition and give them very specialized or specific career counseling, tutoring, etc. 4P1, placement. Placement, and like I said earlier, Temple College and the way we function and my advisory boards and my stakeholders are going to probably be uniquely different than yours. But we have also worked and found that what was my career readiness has changed significantly for this generation that's in our colleges. Resume, even in interviewing skills that we think are kind of just groomed in a natural progression. We've had to backtrack, and I've had to have lots of conversations with students, and we've had to remind our people that it's a grooming process all the way through, from start to finish to placement in that field. So there's a lot of graduate counseling that's embedded into this. Also a lot of administration of graduate surveys that can provide them satisfaction information that provides you as an institution options to look at things differently or see what is a false assumption and what you need to do to overcome different false assumptions. Again, as notated earlier, the original goal was 10 best practices that we were hoping to find, but we found 7 out of this one. And then going to your performance improvement plans, you'll see this one a little bit different than the other themes, but a lot about career fairs, business rapport, field experiences and connection, and hiring aspects. There's also a lot of placement strategies about GradCast, and then I don't want to step on Lone Star's toes, but I have been very impressed with their, and I know I'm going to say it wrong, IEMSI, the database for the EMSI. And so when you get a chance and can look at Lone Star, they're working with EMSI, which is basically a mining of where all your alumni are. GradCast is fabulous. I don't ever want to step on what Bill Brooks does, and I don't want to ever step on what we already do with our placement surveys, but EMSI really showed me, I didn't realize some of our alumni there, and some of the people that were employing our alumni that we're not using as stakeholders or we're not using on our advisory board. So I want to just give a call out to what they're doing and what that leadership project is. Now, I will tell you, I again have shared these. People, I hope, have used them. I know I've received feedback that as people were writing Perkins, they referred to this document and said that they were utilizing this strategy or they were utilizing this idea. As we worked on this, we started developing a network, and we found out that it's the field supporting each other that sometimes gives us a lot of help or ideas or answering questions or even just some brainstorming. So there's a lot of great people that are passing, and I'm going to use Sanjak as an example because I know Catherine is going back to biology, and when she told me, I was surprised but not shocked, because I think all of us that go into administration, it's not like we've left teaching, and there's a lot of us that miss it. And so Don Perry and Steve just retired, so there's a lot of new faces coming on board, and so that's why I wanted to say welcome to the family, and here's how we can help. We're continuing on with this, and through this current leadership project, there's a handout on the table where I've given you a couple of possibilities. So we were working on improving partnerships through building our partnerships for the improvement of the core indicators, and a lot of it is, as somebody is new coming on, helping them with just ideas. I have shared templates. I have a budget template. I do all of my stuff on spreadsheets. I've shared my template When I do request for what will be Perkins funding, I have a very specific form that I make my department chairs fill out. They have to attach it to a core indicator to show which core indicator they can improve with this funding request. And then they have to also show me how they're going to assess that core indicator or assess the use of that equipment, that professional development, that tutoring, whatever they're requesting. So I've created templates that I don't mind sharing, that I've shared with many people. Along with it, when we were working with these networkings, we found out, who could be the most help. Now, I will tell you, the initial design on this one was a senior, seasoned Perkins person that had strong performance on core indicators with somebody that might be new and had weak performance on core indicators. And I'm a very linear person and found out that that does not really exist, because you have somebody that might be brand new at Perkins and have high success on their core indicators that, and please, I mean this no disrespect, that really didn't involve you. It was what has happened to that institution over the longevity. But there's also seasoned people that, because of the dynamic where their institution is, that they don't have high performance on a core indicator because of an interesting dynamic. It's not anything that they're doing wrong, it's just they're struggling with whatever that demographic, that dynamic is, where their institution's area is and things like that. So the original design was always kind of a strong performance and information with somebody that was struggling, and we found out that that's not always true. And so it was a more modified design of all the different people that could help. We also found out that even us as seasoned people, and Arlene, I know you said 19 years, correct? How many times in the last 3 years have you gone, I've been interpreting that wrong for about 3 years now? I am guilty of doing that at NACTI. Something that was in my head was almost too severe than what the interpretation was. And I will go ahead and give you an example. When I was writing my programs of study, for some reason, I had it in my head that a program of study had to have both secondary, post-secondary, and bachelor's articulation. So I had taken it too large, okay? And so we're also learning as those. So I'm definitely not the genius. I got my shirt upside down. And I fumble at times, y'all, as I kind of get something skewed in my head and have to correct myself. So that being said, we are working on a network design, which will be the final project of this current leadership grant. We also have implemented a listserv. In fact, I sent out a listserv notice today because through my next Perkins, we're looking at a career coach, career counselor system, and I needed a job description. There's no sense recreating the wheel. And if you're new at Perkins and you prefer spreadsheets, I definitely will share you my spreadsheet template that has the RFA language embedded into it. So when you're writing the professional development, you can see it right there on the spreadsheet, how you need to write it and what you need to specify in that description. If you want to know a different way to ask for funds where you kind of force the department chairs who are using the equipment to have ownership of it and understand Perkins, don't hesitate. But through this listserv is where we can communicate with each other and say, hey, I need this, can you help me? Or I'm struggling with this, and we can help each other in the field. We also have created a blog, and so if you'll go on the TACTI website and click on blog, we have 2 blog posts. One is a welcome post, and one is I understand the rest of the world is on vacation right now, right? All those faculty members are on 9-month contracts. And you'd be amazed, there's a lot of them that they're not on a cruise and they're still not answering their email. And I understand that, y'all, so I push a lot of my processes into April to catch them before they leave. And I understand y'all's frustration. I'm amazed how many people, I think they turn their cell phone off all summer or they refuse to answer it, one of the two. And I will also tell y'all, my advantage at Temple College is 15 years, because people go, oh, that's Leslie on the phone. Oh, if she wants me to give Perkins money, I better be nicer. Hi, Leslie, what you need? When you're new at it, you don't have that threat assessment yet. You will get there after a couple of years. Trust me, it's coming. But right now, I definitely understand that, because they go, I don't know who that is calling. And they don't answer it, or they go, I'll get to them later. But you can't do later. You really needed the information today, if not tomorrow at the latest. So I understand that, and I promise you it's some time. But that blog post also will start being archived as people just give different information. I watch the blog post. I think, Sheila, I heard you in here. Sheila, weren't you the one that posted that you needed some help with your advisory? My advisory board is a group of people. And let me explain to you this way, y'all. I teach criminal justice, so when I took over Perkins, I didn't want the 13 other departments to say, well, CJ gets preferential treatment. It's also hard if you're what they consider to be the Santa Claus of Perkins money. And they think, well, Santa gave that person only a stocking, and this person over here got the huge gateway, and all of a sudden you're the bad person on campus. So I put a barrier between me, okay? Because I was the department chair managing all the money. My barrier was my 2 division directors and my AVP, and they approved funding sources. So as everybody sent in their request for funding, I sent it to them and said, okay, y'all, what are the priorities? How does the budget fit? Where is it showing that it improves this core indicator? And then I would force people through their division director, not directly to me. I didn't want somebody going, hey, Leslie, help me out. No, no, no. No buddy system. No BFFs, nothing in Perkins, okay? It has to go through the appropriate channels so that you're not the bad guy. So create yourself a buffer, create yourself an advisory board is one of my recommendations, so then you refer to them. And they become a strong team on making sure they understand Perkins, and then they help you communicate it to instructional leaders, to executive councils, to other faculty, to other CTE. I also encourage you, and we've done this very successfully, we've now kind of created basically a Perkins track, so lots of information at TACTI. We've also designated somebody as the Perkins representative on the TACTI board. Hi, my name is Leslie. I'm the Perkins representative on the TACTI board. But that way we can make sure that we keep things that y'all need to know in the information. Specifically, TACTI board made a decision to not hold TCCIL. We wanted to make sure that that got communicated to y'all so y'all don't have to do amendments within your Perkins grant. I know I speak really fast, but I also wanted to make sure I left plenty of opportunity if you have any questions, concerns, and I know some of y'all already probably have some questions over this morning's presentation. So before I step away and let them take back over, and I hope I haven't taken too much of your time, questions or concerns? Yes? Probably I will attempt, but if it's not me, I guarantee you I will point that direction almost immediately. And they're leaving, so somebody hijack them and tell them to come back.
No, they're just bringing the mics
They're doing
around.
microphones.
Thank you. So for Perkins Core Indicator 2P1, it says credential, certificate, or diploma. Does that include GED, students that earn a general education diploma? They're non-traditional students that didn't get a high school diploma, but it says diploma, so we just don't know.
No, these would be, because someone in a GED program wouldn't necessarily be a CTE concentrator, so they would not be included.
Who else had?
Just saying, I think diploma is isn't that kind of a national or federal term?
Yes, yes.
It doesn't really apply to what we do in Texas. So it's not high school diploma. It's in some states, I guess they have like diploma programs where you get it's similar to our industry certification credential.
I have a question about your promising practices document. On 2P1, the third bullet, I'm just wanting to see if you can elaborate on the third bullet about review the viability of occupational skills. I'm interested in your interpretation of viability.
So I will tell you, please know that I didn't submit these. These were all submissions that were done across the state for people that had met the core indicators. We also struggled when we saw that, and so we left it a little bit in its original format so that we didn't skew the interpretation. But when I called them and asked them about that, they were saying, and I know the person, but I don't want to give their name out at this point, just because I might later refer them to you after I have their permission. When I asked for an understanding of that, there's a lot of time periods what people think is going to be something that is workable was something that it was for this specific person, not something that was broad that really had a significant impact. Does that make sense? What your advisory board wanted in marketable skills, make sure that it has an impact on a significant amount of population, not something that was just for their employer and they needed to hire 5 people. Does that help you now?
Right. I mean, we've gotten rid of them because they don't have that value, but I was just wanting to know what they were saying.
Yeah, I had to call that person and ask for some interpretation, and we've gotten that question before, making sure it's not individualistic to just that company.
I had a question on the 4P1, on the very last page where it talks about embedded licensure requirements, and it said explore your requirements with your accrediting agency, and if possible, utilize the licensure exam as the final exam or require the licensing completion as part of the graduation requirements. Can we do that?
Yes and no. It's very specific to the program. So in criminal justice, the police academy, we have a final exam, but then the licensure exam has to be after endorsement, and they actually have to pass the final exam before they get endorsed to go take the state test. In this specific instance, it was a DMSO program, and the DMSO students were leaving, and then they would forget about the licensure exam, or they kept putting it off. So that program allowed them to embed the licensure as part of a capstone. And so the students actually finish out, and then the last week within their final take that licensure. And so they weren't delaying them, and it was just a final completion. So it's very program specific if you can do it or not.
On 2P1, when you were talking about awarding certificates or degrees without students having to apply for graduation, did you say that you all had implemented that?
I will.
Temple?
When I said, hey, we need to do this, they said, we already do that. So it's definitely one of those where there was a miscommunication on what was understood at faculty versus what goes on in our advising role and with our advising department. So, but it was one of those that we took it to the next level, and we started running degree audits to make sure that they were taking on track and not going, oh, and by the way, I want this elective over here, keeping them on point and finishing them out.
Okay.
There's a lot of institutions that I found out do this, but a lot of people in Perkins didn't realize their institution was doing it. So it's kind of ask your institution, do they do this or not?
Well, the reason I ask is we had considered doing that, and the reason we didn't implement it was we were told that it would affect their financial aid. So,
And see, that's an institutional, I know my institution, it's one of those where it's not kind of a guaranteed thing, but it's where there's a data analysis of it done. And it's, to be honest with you, outside of Perkins and really within our advising and our admissions and enrollment services division.
And Leslie, we had a question over here. Let me get to Kinsey.
You were talking about data analysis on 2P1 and looking over and running majors and making sure that people that need to be in your majors are in there and vice versa. We were doing that, and we started coming across a trend of we would give them to the individual programs, directors, coordinators, and say, are these students in your major? Should they be in your major? And then we started looking back over a couple semesters, and we were seeing bounce in, bounce out, because they weren't actually looking closely. They were just saying, they're taking one of my classes. They're not taking one of my classes. So we actually backed away from it because we kept seeing a bouncing of data. Did you guys struggle with anything like that, or have you been doing it long enough to see that it's more, if it's a negative thing versus a positive thing?
Temple College used to struggle with retention. I will tell you this year when I pulled Perkins, I saw green. Green is just a glorious color. And I'm a Baylor graduate, so I really like green. But anyways, green is a glorious color when you see it on Perkins, right? I went back and looked at my retention those years that we struggled when I started seeing some change, and it was the data analysis. Now, I understand sometimes you will have department chairs that are not invested at looking at it, or they don't even realize the students are major because maybe they're completely online. For us, the advantage was not only were we looking at the majors, we were looking at what classes they were registering for. And so when so if they don't know them as a major, pull them as a major, but if they're that major, why aren't they taking classes specific to that degree plan? Now, I don't know how y'all's institution are, y'all, but with our structured pathways, we're one of the institutions that's on structured pathways. So now our degree plans are starting to get narrowed where they're getting blocked. You know, if they say they want to take this class and it's not listed on the degree plan, they can't take it. Or if they come to me and I'm going to substitute it, I have to go into the system. So that's been advantageous too. But for us, we found out those other basically working habits that were creating us problems. And we found it out with those that were transfer electives. We also found it out recently that our LVN programs, we had students coming in there and they didn't want to take the TSI, so they were signing up for another certificate. So they'd come in and say, well, I'm LVN. Well, you don't have a pre-cert. Does that make sense? And so it created us problems in our bookkeeping degree. So in answer to your question, you have another problem in itself that sometimes data creates other problems if people aren't invested in the data like they should be. Ours helped us find some processes that were creating problems for us. So I don't really have a great answer for you. I'm sorry, but I understand what could be that dynamic.
And we have another question over here.
I do apologize, so many questions I have. So all of our students that we report for Perkins are credit students, not non-credit, correct? Or do we take into consideration non-credit students as well, or is it just credit?
It's the only non-credit students that are, or CE students, are those that are in programs that are 360 contact hours or more, like, you know, your firefighter or your paramedic, I think some welding programs, depending on how, you know, the program is offered. So it's just 360 contact hours or above for Perkins.
Are there any other questions in the few minutes we have before we reconvene training? If there are none, please give Leslie a warm thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Leslie, we can't thank you enough for that presentation. I think it's so helpful for you all to be able to hear directly from someone that's your peer, that's at an institution that has, you know, lives this, that opens that application just like you do, that submits the information. And I really appreciate her willingness to, you know, provide information that she has already found to be helpful with the way that she implements the grant. I know there are many others around the state that are very experienced as well, that are willing to help. I mean, I think it's one thing hearing from coordinating board staff, but I think it's really helpful and maybe less intimidating to hear this directly from a colleague that's at a college. So we have about 3 minutes if you want to regroup and stretch for a minute until we get our next presentation up and going. And just as a reminder, at 2 o'clock, the broadcast is scheduled to end, and then we'll have more of a hands-on exercise, which doesn't really lend itself for broadcasting. So, and if you know, if some of you have already been in the portal and are comfortable with getting around in the Perkins portal, you know, certainly don't feel like you have to stay for that last hour. But that will officially end the broadcast of this presentation.
It, right? So this is just to kind of go over a lot of what's already been covered. You know, Mindy and Dwayne covered a lot of the areas of what we're looking for when we want to approve something. So this is just to kind of show you some of the common errors that we see when we're having to reopen an item. So there's this. Of course, I would be the one to forget how to use the machine. Am I doing this wrong? Yep, I figured it out. You know, I had lunch. I was all excited with Leslie's presentation, you know, so. Okay. I'm making sure you all are awake, right? Right, okay, good, okay. So. Common issues. I'm sure, you know, I'm not going to go over every detail on here, but I'm sure several of you have heard these about the total budget amount is not equal to the actual allocation. We want you to make sure that when you are doing your budget, you allocate for all the money that has been assigned to you or to your institution. Sometimes we receive an application or an amendment and the reallocation amount is set off, is shortened. Or I hear sometimes, well, we were trying to save some money, and I think that's awesome and that's wonderful. However, we really need you all to allocate for the entire amount of your budget for your entire allocation. Make sure that not more than 5%, how many times you've heard this already? Not more than 5% of your total direct costs is allocated for the indirect or the administration element. We do have an indirect calculator, as Mindy pointed out earlier. It is on the Perkins page down at the bottom in the web resources section. Make sure when you're doing your application and or amendment that you have budgeted at minimum 15% on the 60 by 30 Texas completion activity. This can be checked and verified on the CB 320 before you submit. And that is a requirement in the RFA. And one of the biggest ones is actually you list a whole bunch of items in a line, but there's no itemization or there's no individual cost, and it just says, you know, medical supplies, $20,000. Well, that could be anything. So we really need you all to break those out, either multiple lines or break it out abbreviated within the line. Just make sure that we can understand the abbreviation. So. Regarding just amendments, make sure that you've indicated on the summary the changes that are taking place. All too often, we've received summaries that, or amendments that there's nothing in the summary at all. And so we need to know why you're submitting this amendment, why now. You need to make sure that the format, Mindy and Dwayne went over very carefully how much we look at the format as directed in the RFA, the format of how you're entering the information. So please be aware of that. It is in the RFA, and there is a section on Appendix K that provides examples of how to submit an amendment. Our portal's a little tricky. It's not as easy as we would like, you know, for when you want to change a line item. You need, for an amendment, you actually need to go in and subtract out the line as its own line and then add it back in as the new line. So there's, as I stated though, there are examples in the RFA in Appendix K. And one of the challenges that we've had lately, especially as we get closer to the end of the year, you know, we're coming up on our July 1st deadline for amendments. And some of you all are like, oh my God, we still have, you know, $20,000 and, you know, they want to buy a new fire truck now, you know, and so it's kind of like, okay, you know, it's like, how can we spend this? Well, if you have the funds and you have a vendor and you have justification, you can do this. However, we are going to want you to confirm to us that, one, you're going to get that item in on time, and that students are going to be able to utilize it. So those are the two things that you are agreeing to when we have that no-go with you, and that you're agreeing to everything that is listed in the RFA. So. And if you have questions, just, sorry, no, just raise your hand. Okay, so some error spotting. So we're going to kind of do this as a group, and I provided a little bit of the, I provided the entry format. Oh, yes, Tamara.
Let us get you the mic.
Oh, they're bringing the mic, Sarah. Question.
July 1st is actually set.
Mm-hmm.
And is it to actually submit on the 1st? You know, some federal.
Oh, yeah, as long as it's in by end of day, we'll say.
By 5 o'clock on Monday.
On the 1st.
Oh, but it's a Saturday. It still has to be in by the 1st, because this year. Ouch.
That being said, I will, we do, okay, two things, as I mentioned to you earlier, putting me on the spot, thanks a lot, you know. Okay, so two things. First of all, yes, the deadline is the 1st, okay? Yes, it is a Saturday, we understand that. However, what we are, keep in mind though that if we have to reopen it for whatever reason, it's still in by, as long as it's in by the 1st, that's okay. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so even if we have to reopen it and you all have to make whatever kind of adjustments or anything, you know, we try to get it back to you as quickly as possible. That being said, just as an FYI, our agency is going to close early on Friday, the 30th, right? Yes, at noon. And we will also be closed on July 3rd and July 4th. So we actually are not actually going to see it until Wednesday, July 5th. So, but we do notice the submission dates, because as you may be aware, and we do mention it in the RFA, one of the elements that is done for the risk assessment, because we assess all of you all every year, is late reports, late submissions. So we do look at that. That's why some things are very date sensitive. So, any other questions? Okay. So error spotting on Schedule A. So Schedule A is salaries and fringe benefits. On the RFA, it states, you need to list the grant activity. That activity is kind of what I was talking about in regards to like the 60 by 30 element. We have special POPs, we have professional development and so forth. You want to put in the brief description of what the position is, how much time is on the project. This is not how much time is the person working, period. How much time are they putting in on the project, and the amount. So on the first line, did we provide a title as required? Yes, part-time advisor, Bluebonnet Campus part-time advisor. Is there a description of the work done, though? So we have no idea. Is it related to CTE? No clue. So, okay. So percentage of the time list tells us that 100% of this person's part-time job is dedicated to the Carl Perkins focus task. So this would be sent back because we don't know if it's for CTE or not. It just says it's a part-time advisor. And there's no description of what they're going to be doing. So on line 2, is there a title of the position? Yes, it's a counselor, sort of. Is there a description of work? Does it relate to CTE? Okay. This percent of time on project, percentage of time tells us that only 50% of the person's job is dedicated to Carl Perkins. But since we don't know if this person's full-time or part-time, again, we don't know if this is accurate or not. So it needs to follow the format that's in the RFA. So on line 3, we have a title. Again, yes. Is there a description of the work? Again, no. Is it related to CTE? No clue. So these are things, we are looking at all this information, as Mindy and Dwayne and Donna have said over and over again, we are looking at every line, every detail. So these are, we would see this and we'd go, okay, we have to send it back. We need more information. So this is an example of some of the information, some of the stuff we've received. On Schedule B, travel. You want the name or position of the traveler, the CTE program or function, the purpose, the justification, dates and location, if known, and the cost. So on line 1, we have a title. It says faculty. We have a conference, the NISOD conference. Is it CTE? Correct. NISOD is actually a conference that is for both academic and CTE faculty. So in this case, we would definitely, most certainly need to make sure that the faculty is CTE that is attending, that is being funded through Perkins. When is the conference? Exactly. Where is the conference? Again, we don't know. So you need to make sure that you indicate this information. This is required information as per the RFA. So on line 2, we have welding students, industry field trip, April 2017 in Dallas. So do we have a title of a traveler? We have students. Are students allowed to be funded under Perkins? No, correct, yes. Oh, you all were listening to Mindy, excellent. So only employees, so students cannot be funded. So right there, that alone has already, said this line is not allowable. So line 3, Dean of Technical Studies, TACD Conference Spring. Why no? The dean, that's correct, an executive officer. Boy, you all have read this. I'm liking it. Awesome. Okay, so, but do we have a location? Is everything else okay? No. What else are we missing? The location, right. And when, it just says spring, but we kind of know that, so. So these, again, these are things that we're looking at. We are reviewing these, so you need to be aware of this type of information. Okay, capital equipment. Program or activity for which the item is being purchased, the number of units, the unit cost, if it's more than one, and a description and justification. Yes, questions? Uh-huh. Okay. Right.
And for those listening online, the question is, when we're filling this out and don't have specific location and dates yet, what do we do?
Right. And in the RFA, we do provide as an example, you put TBD, to be determined, when you don't know the location or you don't know the date, which can be difficult sometimes when you're doing your planning now for next year. So it is tricky sometimes. You know your cosmetologist teacher wants to go to this conference. It's next May. She doesn't know where. They just knows it's the annual conference that she goes to get her information for her teaching. So that being said, you just put TBD. Now, when you do an amendment in the future, once you have that information, you want to update that when you are aware of it. Yes, Shannon.
I've had some of my faculty, like maybe 2 or 3 requests to go to the same conference. How do you guys view that? Because I think that I'm like not really comfortable with that. I think one can go and they can bring information back. How's that viewed within the proposal?
That's actually going to be an institutional decision. We used to have more of a stricter guideline where the limitation was 2. In the past, I've worked in an institution where the limitation was 1. But that was an institution decision. So it's really going to be up to the institution how you want to put in your own Perkins policy and procedure for that type of function and that type of spending. So does that help? Yes.
If you don't mind, I was going to add that we have an institutional policy that really kind of not hinders it, but kind of sways against it. However, a lot of my Perkins, I need to send them because it's accrediting bodies or it's accrediting standards or even continuing education requirements. So that becomes kind of the anomaly that circumvents the institutional policy, at least in my Perkins, if that helps you.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Any other questions? Okie dokie. All right, so moving on to capital. All right, so in looking at capital, we have a rotary drilling bit replica set of 9 for $40,500. So is there a program related to this? No. So we need to know what program is this for. Is there a description and a justification? No, so there's a description, but we really don't know what it's being used for. I mean, in some cases it seems understandable, but it does help to know that, that you all are taking the time to actually ask your instructor, how is this going to be used in the classroom? Exactly. I was like, I wonder if somebody's going to notice that. Very good. It's not capital. Exactly. So you need to be aware of that. It seems like it is because it's $40,000, but there's 9 of them. So when you do the math, it doesn't equate that. So this is actually even in the wrong schedule. Another reason why we do look very closely at these, and we would let you all know that you would have to amend your application and put that line in the correct location with the updated information. Good eye. Okay, so second line. Is there a program related to it? Yes, okay. Is there a number of units and a unit cost? No, okay. Is there a description? This, but not is there a justification? No, okay. So again, this one we would question it. It says lab monitors. Now I'll be honest, I mean, if it said lab monitor, it's still missing a justification and more explanation, but we would probably not question it for Is there more than one? It's pluralized here, so we have to assume that you meant to pluralize it, which means we need to know how many are there. And with the cost of $6,400, chances are each one is not $5,000, which is the requirement for Schedule C. So on the last one, is there a program listed? Is there a description and justification? What is it? What's a workstation, classroom workstation? What's it for? So again, you guys need to ask these questions because guess what? We're going to ask them too. So you want to know where the money's going. So.
And these examples are out of the applications.
Oh yeah, these are things I've actually received over the years. I've only been with the co-board now for almost 4 years, and these are, everything you're seeing has actually been submitted. So it happened at one point or another. So, okay, so any questions regarding Schedule C? Okay. Schedule D, consultant and service contracts. You need the name of the consultant contractor, if available, the program or activity for which the consultant contractor is being used, the campus, a description of and justification for the services provided. So if we look at line 1, do we have a name of the contractor? No, but as in the case like with travel, when you don't know, you can put in TBD, to be determined. But again, in the future, when you're doing an amendment and you have this information, you need to update that too, okay? So is there a program related to it? No. There is a description of what's happening, consultants, advisors for training, but it doesn't tell us, how does this relate to CTE? So it's consultants and advisors. Well, those can go either for CTE or academic. Is it for trainings? Is it for trainings for faculty or for trainings for students? Again, these are the types of questions that we're going to be asking, so it behooves you all to ask it first. Yes. He's coming with the mic.
For the to be determined, like professional development or consultant, does it require us to do an amendment when we get the correct information, or could we just send you an email to say line item such and such, here's the correct information?
You can shoot us an email, as it's stated in Appendix K. However, if you are doing an amendment, we encourage you, anything that you've sent to us via email, we encourage you to go ahead and update your amendment at that time. Because how many of you all have gone through the internal auditing process that we have here and got those lovely emails from our audit? No? So they are looking at the final version of your application. That is what they are using when they are doing their review for their internal audit. So again, it's to your benefit to get that application updated with future amendments if you need to, because that's what they're going to be looking at. So thanks, Debbie. Any other questions? Oh. Okay, so looking at line 2, again, we have a name of a person and we have a literacy summit, but again, what's it for? Is it CTE related? Is it for faculty? Is it for students? See, all these questions you just need to constantly be asking yourselves when you're submitted your information from your departments, your deans, your faculty, so that you can look at it and say, hey, did you do this? Did you do this? Where's the CTE relation? Looking at the last one, Aaron Hochner, IT department. Aaron will update the CTE training database. Okay, so is that one allowable? Why? He's an employee, excellent. God, you all were listening to us, excellent. So exactly, he's an employee, so therefore he cannot be a consultant. Okay, any questions on Schedule D? Okay. We don't do Schedule E, it doesn't qualify for the basic grants, so Schedule F. So, oh, by the way, when you're filling out the application and you get to Schedule E, just put NA or no entry or something. It needs some sort of data, otherwise it won't be processed. But just keep in mind that that's not an eligible schedule that we look at for basics. So Schedule F. The program or activity you need to list the program or activity for which the item is being purchased, the number of units to be purchased, the unit cost, if it's more than one, a description of the item, and the total cost. So looking at these, on line 1, is there a program listed? Yes, excellent. So it says program promotional materials. Is it unallowable or allowable? Why is it unallowable? Right, exactly. Very good. Promotional materials are not allowable. What if it said marketing? It needs to be CTE specific, exactly. And there's also an element missing there. If it's marketable, marketing or outreach materials, what does it need? Texas Genuine, correct, excellent. Okay, you all have been looking at your RFA, this is wonderful. So you need to indicate that on the line. If we don't see that indicated, we will send it back, because you do need to mention that you acknowledge that as per the RFA, it states in there that you have, if you're using Perkins funds for marketing or outreach materials or activities, you need to incorporate Texas Genuine. Okay. So on line 2, manufacturing instructional supplies, $7,500. Is there anything wrong with that? Justification? How about what is it? What is an instructional supply? It's a big chunk of money, $7,500. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. You need to itemize it out. You need to actually spell out what you're purchasing, how many of each, what's the unit cost, because it's such a large chunk of money. It's more than $5,000, so we're definitely going to be looking at it. Okay, line 3. Main campus, working lunch for CTE program advisory board meetings. 3 meetings at 50 attendees each, times $30. No, I hear. Okay, why no? No food. Okay, so you cannot, it states in the RFA Appendix I cost guidelines for food costs for participants' meetings. Light meals not to exceed $20 a person for participants who are cloistered in an all-day, at least 6-hour meeting or training session. Advisory board meetings do not qualify. So these are for other types of meetings that your group might get together, but you have to justify. It's very tricky, and I can see why some people are just automatically, no, it makes perfect sense. So,
But just to clarify, advisory board meetings would not qualify because they're generally not 6 hours in length. I mean, if you can get your business and industry in for a 6-hour meeting, we want you to share that, how you're doing that.
Okay, good point. All right, so line 4, venue rental for completion ceremony. Is this one okay? No, why is it not? Okay, what program? But the main element is in the RFA, it states, costs associated with ceremonies, banquets, or celebrations are not allowed. So even if this was, let's say, for the nursing pinning ceremony, you cannot, this is a celebration ceremony, and it's part of that element. So you cannot, it's not an allowable cost. So you need to be aware of everything that's in the RFA. And I know it's really tricky, and I know it's a lot of information. But as Mindy, Dwayne, and Donna and I have said, we are here for you all to call us. You're not sure. We obviously would encourage you to look at the RFA first, but if you're not sure, you can always call us. So. And let's see. Oh, okay, so some hints regarding the Perkins portal. As mentioned before, you want to do that hard entry twice when you're working directly in the portal. Otherwise, everything kind of gets smushed together and we really can't see it very well. The description, this is a little hint somebody asked me to include. Okay, the description sections on Schedule B, C, D, and F have a limit of 256 characters. That is including spaces. So, little trick that we found that works. We encourage you all to kind of work in Word when you're working on your application process. If you're working in Word and you kind of block that section, down at the bottom left, it gives you a word count. If you click on it one time, it'll show you character space as well. So just a little hint there. We encourage you to go ahead and abbreviate for the description and justification. Just make sure that it's somewhat comprehensible, okay? Sometimes, if we get stuff that's just a little too cryptic, we're gonna have to reopen it so it's a little clearer, because you know, I'm not the only one who looks at it. Mindy's not the only one who looks at it. We all look at different parts of an application, so it's very important that we all understand what's going on. So, very important. The Perkins portal does not have spell check. So, another reason we highly encourage you all to work in Word first, because it usually you'll redline and catch those that aren't spelled correctly. As I mentioned earlier, for amendments, and if you look in the Appendix K of the RFA, it does give some examples. But when you need to delete a line, our portal is not set up for quick and easy deletion. You need to actually manually go in, enter the information again, subtract it out, then enter a new line with the new information in it. So you need to remember on the amendment, it's a little trickier on the process. We've provided examples in Appendix K of the RFA, but again, you can always call us if you need additional assistance on that. And when preparing an amendment, especially some of you all have Schedule F that has, I don't know, 200, 400 items on, line items on each, on that schedule. And we're trying to match up to, okay, this item was deleted and this one's being added, but it's replacing this, but they're updating this. And so sometimes it's kind of tricky trying to find the original item. So as you all may be aware, when you're viewing the application and/or amendment, you can see line items. So what we highly encourage you all to do is to save that version like in a PDF or Word or print it out and just use it as a reference. So when you're doing the amendment, you can refer to, this is line 10, but you're referring to line 2, which is this is the line you're making the change on. So it would really help us because a lot of times, as I stated, we're sometimes flipping through pages and pages, and some of y'all like really to detail each line. You know who you are. So, okay. And don't forget, the target measures need to reflect the strategies and activities of the core indicator. Mindy has really kind of tried to enforce that. And so just be aware of that. We're looking at that on your performance improvement plan. Again, Schedule G, 5%, no more than 5% of your direct costs. The biannual reports should reflect the results of the target measures. And that on the expenditure reports, the CB 320 must be completed with the final expenditure report. It is not, the only time it is where you all actually enter the data directly is on the final expenditure report. It is automatically completed when you're submitting the application or an amendment. We do encourage you to look at it. As I stated earlier, it does show you the listing of all the amounts and how they're categorized out. You can check your 5% there. You can check your 15% for the 60 by 30 text allocation. So just to kind of be aware of that point. And that's it. So yes, that was quick. So close.
Okay, so if you have what I refer to as support courses for your CTE, such as anatomy and physiology for nursing surg tech. So if they want some equipment, say a model for the anatomy and physiology class, because CTE students take that course, is that permissible to buy for them?
You want to take that one?
Yeah. And that's a really good question. The response is that because both CTE and non-CTE students will be taking that, so academic students that intend to transfer as well as your CTE nursing students, ideally, and we've had this question before, you would not just say, can Perkins pay for all of it, but perhaps try to get some sharing of the costs, because there will be academic students taking those A&P labs as well. Okay. Yes.
if you wanted to send them to a conference, would that be okay if
The
part
academic
of it was?
instructor?
Yeah, if it was somebody that CTE students would be in their class.
Yeah, I would
Would
say
a percentage of
the
that be
same
okay as well?
response would be true as well. And we would consider these requests on an individualized basis. But I think fully covering the cost of the conference and travel would be questioned. And so if there was more of a sharing involved, then that could be something we would consider.
We had a question up here.
I think you answered my question. I had the same question with equipment. If I have a technical classroom where mostly everything was paid for with institutional funds, but there's this one piece of equipment that was paid for with Carl Perkins. It's not the majority of it, I would say. If you're looking at the classroom, maybe 20%. But we would like to schedule some academic courses in there, like 1 or 2. Would that be permissible?
As long as the CTE class has priority.
Yes, of course.
For use
Yes,
of
they would
that.
be scheduled in first,
Yeah.
but we still have slots where, as a
Right.
scheduling, I'm like, I would like to put
Yes.
academic courses in there, which some of them do have technical students in them. It'd be like an computer course or so forth.
Yes.
But on our campus, some people said yes, some people said no. So now I know the answer. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
And while Dwayne is putting the next set of slides up, and we're almost finished, so hang in there, I do want to explain, and Elizabeth touched on it, what our processes are for review of the grant applications. They come in, and each grant is assigned to either Mindy, Elizabeth, or Dwayne, and then they do the initial review of the application, and then once they approve it internally, it goes to the next stage of approval, and that's where Elizabeth does the fiscal review, where she's just looking at the budget schedule. So that's the second review, and then the third review is done by me. So there's really 3 chances for you to get questions from us, and I know we've used the term a lot, sent back, but it's really, an email message will come back that the application is denied/reopened. And then normally you'll get an email from us with hopefully you'll get it before that someone hits that last button, but with the question of what it is we need more information about. So, any questions about that? Okay, so the last section is really about desk reviews and site visits. Does anybody notice the error glaring on that slide? I didn't either. 2016, yeah. So don't ever use your old slides and update them, okay, without changing them. I changed it once, but, okay, so every year, the Perkins staff look to see who will get a desk review or a site visit. It used to be that every school was put on a 4-year cycle, and so once every 4 years, every school would be visited for the purpose of a site visit for review of Perkins. And that doesn't happen anymore because we started to do this risk assessment. I had come from the Board of Nursing, where I was accustomed to doing risk assessments to determine who was getting site visits. So we were planning to do that anyway, and around that same time we had a visit from the U.S. Department of Ed, who they were also going that way and really encouraged us to change our processes to determine this based on a risk assessment. I do need to clarify that there are 2 types of reviews that are done by the coordinating board. I know it's very confusing. One is the fiscal audit, and that's done annually. That's done in a different division from us. And what I'm talking about are programmatic Perkins reviews, monitoring. So that's of your grant, how you're implementing the grant, the processes that you're using in implementation of the grant as outlined in your grant application that gets approved. So every fall, we run a risk assessment, and several factors, several things are scored that I've listed up there. The amount of the award, so the greater the amount of your award, if you're in the $1 Million Club or up, you know, that's going to increase the risk more, because the higher the amount of money, the more risk there is. We are, subsequently, we're in that same boat with the feds. Texas is, because we get one of the largest allocations for the Perkins grant, only behind California. So we come up often too because of that, like they say, they'd like to visit us every 4 to 5 years, and our last one was in 2012. So we're a little overdue now. So we go through the same stressors that you do when you're being visited. Then we look at the time since the last visit, the number of amendments, but don't think that that is a bad thing. You know, we don't want to discourage you from submitting amendments, because everybody submits amendments. So, and you know, it's okay to make changes. That shouldn't discourage you. But if you're, you know, getting up there to 10, 11, 12 amendments, that's a lot. But it's just going to increase your number for that one category. Late reports, we might not be, you know, following up immediately saying, where's your report? But you will hear from us, and it does get noted in this way that it increases the score for that indicator. Then, of course, the number of core indicators not met, and then the fiscal desk review, as I mentioned, concerns or issues that are from that. We get data from our fiscal area. So the schools, we run the risk assessment. The top 15 scores, every one of the 15 has a programmatic desk review, and we usually send that out, and it's due around early January, early to mid-January. But the top 5 scores are the schools that have an actual face-to-face site visit. So what we're looking for in the desk review, I've listed here, things like policies, procedures, and documentation. With the switch over to UGG, policies and procedures have really become important, not that they weren't before, but we do have a list in the RFA, so pay particular attention to that, of what you need as far as your policies and procedures. And if you haven't updated them in a while, please do so. And again, we're in that same category with updating ours. And the other thing is that you don't have to have policies and procedures that are specific to Perkins. Your institutions should have policies and procedures for capital equipment, non-capital equipment, travel. Although some things might be more applicable, such as childcare and transportation might just be for your CTE students, but it might not. So some of them might be applicable for just Perkins, but the majority of them should be for you know, your institution-wide. A couple of things that we asked for that were, one was new last year, not the first one. Describe how your institution uses I'm sorry, I'm behind. Describe how your institution uses Perkins funds to supplement rather than supplant CTE activities. But the second one, and that was based on an audit that we had at the coordinating board from KPMG. That's an audit group that audits federal grants. But they want a procedure demonstrated that the institution conducts a financial analysis of year-to-year data, budget and actual, to demonstrate monitoring of supplement versus supplant. So they want to make sure that you have procedures. So this, you know, really this is your fiscal people that need to be informed of this, so that we know that you are watching to make sure that something that's been purchased year after year by state funds, then suddenly it's purchased by Perkins. We want to make sure that you're not supplanting. So this is really putting into action what an institution needs to do to make sure that that is being monitored at the institutional level. So here, this is just a sample of what we do on the site visits. On the first day, we usually schedule meetings with, for example, the person at the college that's oversees the inventory system, and we want to look at the policies and procedures for the inventory control and disposal of equipment. Normally, the people that work with inventory are not accustomed to people coming in from the state and scheduling meetings with them. We found, when we first started doing this, we found that, people would hide from us or suddenly get sick. So we have started putting it on the agenda just so they'll know. We want to make sure that we want you to talk us through your processes for once equipment is ordered and then once it's received, how is it labeled, tagged, and dispensed to the individual department, those types of things. So it's important that we know that you have processes in place, that you know what was purchased by Perkins versus what was purchased by other grants, versus what was purchased by the college, state funding. Also, we spend a lot of time with the people in your position, the person's contact, and other individuals to talk about what your institution is doing to improve performance on the core indicators, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what are some ideas that you want to implement. And then we like to meet with the people that work with special populations and students with disabilities, or including students with disabilities. We want to talk to you about things like how you are selecting students that are eligible for child care and for bus vouchers and travel vouchers and books and those types of things. And again, this is a sample. This is what we've done in the past. We often meet and update things, so it could change, but in general, this is what a visit will involve. Also, it's really our opportunity to see what you're doing at your campuses, which is always of great interest to us. It might not be every 4 years. It could be 6, 7, 10 years before we're there. We do like for you to select 3 CTE programs, and then we schedule meetings with people like the deans or directors of the programs, students if available, and we really do like to talk to students. We want to talk about advisory committees, technology, program evaluations, and how the core indicators fit into, programmatically. One of the things that we really like to see is if you buy capital equipment, if you're buying the latest and greatest technology, we would like to see that in use if possible. And we realize that often students may be in clinical, they may not have class the day we're there, but if at all possible, we do want to see that $10,000 mannequin in use by the students. So what we have done, at least for the last couple years, the 3 programs that we asked to visit, one, that the CTE program that's allocated the most funding for equipment, 2, a CTE program that demonstrates an increase of degrees or certificates awarded over the past 5 years, and for you to come up with that. And we ask you, we leave it up to you to decide which of these programs we would like to visit with, but you can look at your Perkins data resources, and that's on our website. If you haven't looked at that, that's where you'll get a lot of the programmatic information for your application. And then also the most successful non-traditional program, and again refer to the data resources for that. And so that's how we ask you to select those programs that we want to visit with when we're on the site visit. So any questions about that, about how we run the risk assessment or the desk reviews or the site visits? Okay, well, this gives us some time for questions and answer. I would ask do you all mind passing out the post-test? You've seen it before. It's just like the pre-test. Don't put your name on it. It's for us. We want to make sure that we have taught you what we think is important and that you have learned it. The other thing, as a reminder, we will send out the slides from the presentation. We will, once you've had a chance to do the post-test, again, any questions you may have, we are certainly here to answer. Oh, the other thing I meant to include is that we will be sending out an evaluation for you. It'll be on SurveyMonkey. Just fill that out. We are always looking to improve this orientation. Like I mentioned earlier, we've gone from small groups to large groups to broadcasting it. Whatever you think you need more of, you need less of, be sure and put that on the evaluation once you get it. And again, you'll get that electronically. So you'll get the slides, you'll get the evaluation. Yes.
Sorry.
Or just for that particular?
We do give instructions on that. Mindy, do you recall in the basic for the inventory form, or maybe that's the instructions we send out? Is it 3? Did we say 3? How many years on the inventory?
Reported with the final expenditure report.
2.
Yes, it's
For the
As far as the basic
The end of
grant
year
is
inventory.
concerned, is it just for that particular year?
it's cumulative.
Uh-huh,
It's cumulative, so it's every
Okay.
okay.
the desk review. And it's only like in capital 5,000 or more. Our institution may track more items, and that's fine, but for the end of
Right.
cumulative.
Okay.
Okay, what other questions? Yeah.
I'm coming. Got it, okay.
Testing?
Okay, I have 2 questions. One is in planning for budgeting, programs of study. I know we were asked to put some money aside for that. Are we needing to do that again for the upcoming year?
Yes, and that was last year when sometimes at the beginning of the year, the U.S. Department of Education holds some of our money back, and then they give it back to us. And I believe that one was one where money came back at the end, and that was a recommendation because we had a really short turnaround time on that we suggested putting money into programs of study. But yes, we do have the requests out for.
We have 6 that are coming up this year. 3 under the health science cluster and 3 under the architecture and construction cluster. And they will start meeting in September and October. Most of these meetings these groups meet maybe 1-2 times usually, and then we start the process again. So at this time, if you do want to put in some budget funds, those are the 2 areas that we'll be meeting.
And under health, it was what, respiratory therapy and
It's respiratory therapy,
hygiene?
dental hygiene, and radiological technology. And under architecture and construction, it is HVAC, carpentry, and masonry, and electrical, plumbing, and pipe fitting. I'm sorry?
Well, the nomination forms went out to the
Oh, you mean a list of the
presidents,
meetings coming up? Okay.
or the list of 6
Okay.
programs.
Yeah, I'll send it out to all the Perkins
We can
PDs and.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say we can send it with the slides,
Yeah,
but that
we can
wouldn't
do
go
that
to everybody.
Okay, and my other question relates to the end of the year. Like, I guess I always struggle with this. I submit a bunch of email notifications at the end, and should I just go ahead and do an amendment to clean everything up? It still won't exceed the 10%. All the rules are followed. But for cleanliness of the report, should I just do one at the end of the year?
I think so. I think that's basically what Elizabeth touched on earlier. I think because the fiscal review looks at what is in your application, that will help to clean things up. So just keep track of everything that you have an approval for by email, and if you could just do one final one.
Yeah, that'll really help you all actually out, as Donna's saying, because they've asked us, do you have an email correspondence? And if you know a lot of the correspondence, we recommend that you all hang on to that correspondence for your records, so you all can use that if it ever comes under question.
Okay. Anything else? I have had one question came up this week that I wanted to go over really quickly. So the question was, I want to send someone to a conference after September 1st. It's a CTE faculty. And there's an early bird special that's going on right now. Can I do this? Can I pay for this now? Well, the answer is that you can pay for the cost of registration, which will be at a discount because of the early bird special, if you have the money this year with this year's budget under Schedule F, and then pay for the rest of the travel, the flight, if there's a flight, any kind of travel, hotel, meals, et cetera, with next year's grant, because the date of the conference is after September 1st. However, the person that asked the question, their school, the way their procedures are set up, they can't, everything has to be submitted at once. So the cost of the early bird registration wouldn't be tacked on until the travel occurs, and the expenses are submitted for the travel in the next fiscal year. So that, in that situation, that would not be allowable, because that's a potential audit finding if something occurred during the prior grant year. Okay. Okay, have you had a chance to do the post-test? We're going to go over it really quickly and then move on to our last part. Okay. This can be participatory. Number one, 2 of the federally designated core indicators of performance deal with the same issue, which is D, right, non-traditional. 2, what is the minimum federal cost of equipment to qualify as capital equipment? C. If anybody gets that wrong, they're in trouble. Unless your college has a different definition, only because it was said so many times. 3, your college has not met core indicator 2P1 for the past 3 years. The priority for your Perkins Basic Grant proposal should be to C, evaluate the effectiveness of strategies used in the past to improve core indicator performance and target funds towards approaches that are effective, or consider new approaches based on information you got from Leslie. 4, what is the maximum percentage of the budget's total direct costs used to calculate the administration/indirect costs on Schedule G? B, 5%, right. 5, when is email notification instead of an amendment allowable? C, to change cost items in a schedule without changing the scope of activities. 6, what is the minimum required frequency to submit expenditure reports? C, quarterly. 7, what are 2 conditions that are scored to determine risk assessment? B, number of amendments, number of late reports, correct. 8, after risk assessment scoring, how many grantees will receive a site visit? A, 5, yes. 9, how often may a fiscal desk review take place? Annually, B, correct. 10, which core indicators must be met for an institution to be considered for reallocation? C, 2P1, 3P1, 4P1. 11, you can just say the answer. C, refreshments cannot be provided for a recruiting event, correct. 12, C, I heard C somewhere, C is correct, target measures target measure doesn't clearly support improved core indicator performance because it's an installation of equipment, which won't necessarily make an improvement. Yeah.
Here, Donna and I actually had that discussion during lunch, and I'm going to fess up, I think I wrote that question. It's not clear. If the prompt were which of the following are unallowable, is incorrect, statement C is incorrect, but C and D have unallowable things in them. As Leslie and I were talking about, you know, if a Scantron analysis came back on that one, it would be unclear, and I would have tossed that question out.
Yeah.
So.
And because it's the promotional items can be provided for the Allied Health event. Okay, so did learning occur? I hope so. Thank you all for your participation. This ends the broadcast session, and we'll move on to the hands-on. Again, if it's portal and you're comfortable with it, you don't feel like you have to stay, but certainly for a refresher or just to, you know, I always learn new things that are helpful. Certainly you're welcome to stay.